In 1995, Yatsumi Matsuno, designer of Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre, left Quest to join Squaresoft. The result was a glorious entry into the Final Fantasy series, although not a Final Fantasy like we've been used to.
Unlike previous installments into the Final Fantasy series, Tactics did not use the active time battle system, opting instead to go down the route of a turn-based strategy RPG.
Final Fantasy Tactics also introduced the world of Ivalice, which would later be used in Vagrant Story, Final Fantasy XII, and of course, the Tactics Advance games.
But we won't talk about the advanced versions.
Oh, thank God.
Now, Final Fantasy Tactics had two different ports.
One on the iOS, which is a remake of the PSP one.
But with minor changes. But today we'll be focusing on the PS1 version of the game.
Basically everything this game has to show us, be it cutscenes or battles, involve character sprites and an isometric field. While it may not have been the best visual software at the time, the style held up to the rigors of time admirably. Most of the human sprites have retained the classic Final Fantasy job looks, while specific characters relating to the plot get their own look no matter what.
One of the cooler parts about the Final Fantasy Tactics is the job system. But we'll get on that little ditty when we get to gameplay. What I want to talk about is how every job has its own looks to it, and that looks different from any other. Not only letting you know what the character is, but letting you feel that the character actually is that job. Now, the storyline characters like your main character or characters that join your party during the plot will not change outfits according to their class. But any character you hire from the soldier's office will change. Don't let the fact your character's outfit doesn't change bum you out. Your main character actually gets 3 different outfits throughout the main story. He starts with what appears to be some sort of dress, then to armor, and then assless chaps. Final Fantasy Tactics had a lot of different fields to fight on, and some of them you didn't even have to go on during the plot of the story, but each field still looked vastly different than the other. Another nice touch was when you got onto a field for the 2nd or 100th time, and you see it raining, or it be night instead of day. It had a bit of realism and change to the field that made it feel more alive.
In the War of the Lions versions, there's some changes here though. In both of them, there are certain cutscenes that are actually shown in sort of a pencil-drawn animated style. Normally that sounds like it wouldn't look very good, but these are downright fabulous! The iOS version also got a small update that made the sprites look a bit more polished and a tad more cartoony.
Moving on to audio of this game, I found that the tracks in this game weren't horrible by any meaning of the word. It's that none of them were memorable. Though, that being said, the music's always helped set up the tone of the scene. We didn't have a happy, cheery tune when somebody died.
I should point out that the series' longtime composer Nobuo Uematsu did not do the music for this. The tracks are good, it's just nothing that I'd put on my iPod. The sound effects, however, are pretty generic. You're going to hear the same sword slashes and death screams throughout the whole game, and frankly I'm okay with that. While they aren't anything special, I felt that they are actually used really well. A critical hit sound effect, for instance, makes you feel like you just ruined someone's day, even if it was your fist that somehow made that slash sound. During the cutscenes it gets even better. There was a certain scene in Chapter 3 that I felt showed this off best. Nothing was shown, but you could hear what was going on, and it came off as actually pretty haunting.
Except for that goddamn reed whistle. Why would you do that in my ears?
The game's setting is during what is known as the War of the Lions, and if you hang around on the menu screen long enough, it explains to you that this was a war that was started when the old king died, and there's a dispute over who was the rightful successor. Duke Larg is on the side of the current Princess Ovelia, while Duke Goltana believes that the rightful heir is Prince Orinus. Upon starting a new game, you're greeted by a sort of a narrator named Alizlem, who recalls the war and the known hero who ended it, Delita. Then we're introduced to the main character, who actually isn't this hero.
After naming your character and giving him a date of birth, you are brought to the first cutscene of the game. Now, this part can be confusing at first, mainly because you're given a present-day story with an intro battle to show you how to play the game, and then you're thrown into a flashback which goes for a whole first chapter.
This chapter doesn't really do much to affect the plot of the game as a whole. It just serves to establish two characters that we were just introduced to. The main character Ramza and Delita, as well as their relationship with each other. Although I said that this chapter has little to do with the overall story, it becomes very important because the rest of the game to follow is as much about the comparison of these two characters as it is about the war itself.
Now we don't want to get too much into the story, because that's the main focus of the game, and we want you to play the game for yourself. Now let's talk Ivalice.
The game does a wonderful job of having lots of information about the world you're a part of while not forcing you to find it. You can do jobs to discover lost treasures and locations. At one point you're given a book that explains everything you need to know about the religion of the world. And even just pressing select on some of the locations will give you a couple lines about what makes that place significant.
Amongst all the job quests, you will find homage to previous Final Fantasies, which I found to be a very nice touch. And I loved learning about other fables of the world. It made the game feel very lifelike. Almost as if the world wasn't created just for one story for us to enjoy. And apart from the main story quests, you do have some side quests that will get you more characters, equipment, and my favorite part, more life to the game, letting you know there are other things happening in the world as our character's story unfolds.
Again, there are some small differences in the War of the Lions versions, the biggest ones being another side quest and some extra scenes and battles involving Delita. While playing through these versions though, I felt like they were a bit unnecessary. The battles are nearly impossible to lose, and the cutscenes were pretty insignificant to me. Plus they redid the whole dialogue with this annoying Victorian dialect. The game's battle system is pretty basic strategy RPG. You move characters around the field and use them to attack enemies. Luckily, this results in situations where if a battle is too hard, it doesn't mean you need to go out and grind some levels. You just need to rework your strategy.
Since enemies scale to your level, grinding isn't always that important. In fact, an enemy will never outpower you.
That being said, the other side of the system is there are times when a battle just becomes complete horse shit. And when I say horse shit, I don't mean the battle is just hard. There are literally situations where it is impossible for you to win because an NPC you're supposed to protect does something stupid before you even get a turn.
We're looking at you, Algus. You asshole.
What I really like about this gameplay system is the game can be as complex as you want it to be while still being beatable. You can go through the game only understanding the basics like attack and magic and you'll do just fine. If you wanted to go deeper and figure out what Brave and Faith does, you'll be able to play the game better and it becomes a tad easier. Want to go further? Figure out the zodiac signs and what they mean. Suddenly your healing becomes more effective. Or if you're like me, you can straight up break out a damn calculator while playing and work through the damage equations.
Like, magic damage. Magic times spell power times face divided by 100 times target's faith by 100, or bow damage is equal to... Folks, we could be here all day, or you can just understand this man knows how to tactics.
Now here's where the game goes from good to great. The job system.
Now we start off with two basic jobs, Squire and Chemist. These jobs will branch off into two different trees, one being a magical tree where you'll find your healing mages and your attack mages, and the other being a physical tree where you'll find all your melee fighters.
We're not going to spoil all the different jobs for you, but we will mention that the basic staples are here, from thief to summoner. Characters more related to the story can have their own special jobs, such as Agrius and Gafgarion from the opening battle. They had Holy Knight and Dark Knight, respectively.
Now in the War of the Lions version, you get two new job classes, Dark Knight and Onion Knight. Both these classes being very new and unique in how you level them up. The Dark Knight is pretty overpowered, but for the work you have to put into it, it's well deserved. The Onion Knight is useless at first, but after mastering more jobs, it starts to get useful. This is a waste of time in my opinion, considering how much work you have to put into it, and the very little you get back from it.
Apart from these basic jobs, you can further customize your troops with different abilities. Each character can equip a secondary skill set, a reaction ability, a passive, and a movement ability. If you want a flying knight that can cast thunder, gets more speed once attacked, and use a gun, you got it.
Final Fantasy Tactics is one of the best games in the series. Heck, one of the best strategy games to date. Both the world and gameplay can be complex and have a lot to it without forcing itself on you at once, allowing you to figure out things as you go or even on multiple playthroughs.
The visuals have held up nicely compared to others, and the plot progression evolves after each chapter, getting a bit more dark and more mature each time.
Tactics is a wonderful experience that can be so personalized. The troops you fight with aren't just characters from the game, they're your team. This allows a certain character to stand out because they happen to be one of the ones wrecking shop in your battles.
This being said, we found that the music falls short. It's good, but it's not Final Fantasy standard. The only other thing we can really complain about is the amount of horseshit you can run into on certain battles.
Stupid Algus.